Hello and welcome to the first video in a series that I will make covering ABR and SoulWind's playoff games in the Smogon Classic, RBY games of course, since that is the only games that I am actually qualified to speak of. You can see here a bunch of interesting games that I'm sure I would love to cover, but you know, the RBY is what you're here for. So I deliver you the RBY. ABR against FMG. This was the first round matchup. FMG is not really known for his RBY, not really known for his old gens in general, so he earned himself some plaudits by even getting here in the first place, but ABR obviously, we already know he made it through, so he is more familiar with RBY. He is expected to be a bit of a favorite, so let's see how this game develops. Off the bat, we see a Chansey versus Jinx lead matchup. Now, this is traditionally very favored for Jinx. Now, Chansey lead is not very common. It's a bit of a gambit line. Obviously, this Chansey has Sing. You would never lead a Chansey that doesn't have Sing. But, you know, leading it is a bit of a gambit line because it does have this very negative Jinx matchup that other Sing Chansey teams don't have. Because obviously if you lead with Starmie, then you can at least, you know, do something to the Jinx before getting slapped, but Chansey just has to run. However, as we can see from this first two turns, ABR does have a very specific plan for this Jinx. You know, he says, fine, if I find a Jinx, I have to run away, and my Chansey will be bad and useless for the first few turns. He will get to sleep first. That's perfectly okay with me, because I can just sleep sec my Alakazam, which is, you know, standard. You don't mind sending your Psychic to sleep because Psychic types tend to have a lot of chances to wake on things like Chansey and stuff. If you get the chance, they're certainly easier to wake than other Pokemon. So sleep Psych like Alakazam, that's standard, and then send Starmie, who even resists the Blizzard. So very deliberate plan from ABR, and turn 3, the reveal of Surf tells me that this is probably something he planned in the builder, this exact line in the Jinx matchup, because Surf is not a move you run for a lot of things other than for Jinx, especially in a Starmie at the back. So this tells me, maybe I'm wrong, maybe he just tossed down Surf because he felt like it, but when I see this line, I see that ABR has put, you know, a good amount of effort into preparing this game and this opening line, because he came prepared to the Jinx matchup. Obviously, if it was any other Pokemon other than Jinx, Chansey would have just gotten to click Sing turn 1, and the game would have been fairly standard from there. But yeah, it's this. I'm already impressed, and it's 3 turns in. This is good stuff from ABR, and the fact that this Surf crits is really bad for FMG, because now he has this 30% Jinx that he needs to switch out. ABR even predicts that and goes for the recover. So really solid play from ABR so far. Now the game goes on for a few more turns. ABR goes Alakazam first to scout for a Thunder Wave, potentially absorb it, see what's going on with this Chansey that FMG has just revealed. And Chansey clicks Ice Beam, and normally maybe, you know, a few years ago you would automatically assume this is Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Thunder Wave, and Soft Boiled. But nowadays we have seen a lot of sets like Ice Beam counter Sing. Obviously this is very unlikely to be seeing on a Jinx team, so it's probably not that, but it could be still like Ice Beam counter Thunder Wave or Ice Beam counter Thunderbolt, or, you know, some variation of it that is not exactly the set that you expect. So, you know, you can probably guess that this is traditional Bolt Beam, but it's not certain. Now ABR goes back to Chansey on this. This is very reasonable. Alakazam, you could try to wake it, but, you know, he's not very likely to succeed, and you don't necessarily want to give the enemy Tauros chances to come in so early. Although, given that Actually, no, because ABR hasn't even got any sleep yet. Um, yeah, so if you allow Tauros to come in, you can say, that's fine, I go Starmie and Thunderwave it. But since ABR has not gotten a swing off yet, T-waving the Tauros and then watching FMG just switch it out to Chansey and sleep blocking you forever would be very, very bad. So this is actually good from ABR to not attempt to wake this Alakazam up, because a few turns down the line, if Tauros come in, you know, he couldn't afford to go Starmie and really click Thunderwave. He would have had to like go Snorlax and Body Slam, which is, you know, it's not great to take chip on Snorlax so early. And so, of course, you know, you're never happy to switch into Ice Beam with your Chansey, unparalyzed Chansey, because obviously you risk freeze, but it's a single Ice Beam, and you know, sometimes you just have to take the small loss and just hope that it doesn't happen. And so I think this was a perfectly good play by ABR. Now, this Chansey immediately threatens Sing, so FMG correctly goes back to Jinx. Now, if ABR was really, really aggressive, he could have gone to Tauros here. But that was kind of risky, because Jinx had already clicked Lovely Kiss, and Chansey could very easily just be Thunder Waving here. So yeah, no, Tauros is actually an awful play, don't do that. Yeah, you would ideally like to be able to prevent this Jinx from healing, because it's already so low, and when it's so close to eliminating a Sleep Absorber, you really want to do it, because, you know, if this Jinx drops, then it means that the Sing can hit on a much more valuable target. But in this situation, it's very difficult for ABR to actually arrange that safely. So, you know, it's fine that he just stayed in and clicked Sing, of course. Now, Jinx clicks Rest, ABR sings again. I don't know about singing again, but I guess it makes sense, because this Chansey, as you will see in a few turns, is Ice Beam is its only attacking move. It's Sing, Ice Beam counter, and Soft Boiled, of course. So to Ice Beam and do 12 to this Jinx isn't very productive. Clicking Sing might as well reveal that this is Ice Beam and not something like Seismic Toss, because of course if you have Seismic Toss there, you would always click it. But you know, it's not a big deal. You know, Ice Beam is already the assumption when you see Sing Chansey. So this is not the end of the world. Now, FMG does this very weird Snorlax switch. It's an interesting idea, because you wouldn't predict Chansey. Like, you would expect something like a Tauros Witchback on a Jinx that has just rested. However, ABR just stays in and is perfectly happy to wait for this Jinx to wake up and sing her back to sleep, which is, I think, a perfectly fine, reasonable line of play. So this Snorlax Switchback, if this Sing had hit right here, that would have been big trouble for FMG. But he gets saved by the miss. And he's able to go back to Jinx and sack it correctly. Now, we have the IB reveal. Of course, you know, we already hinted that this was already, you know, very easy to guess. But now it's 100% confirmed. We still don't know if it's counter, if it's something like Seismic Toss or Thunder Wave, but with Sing and Ice Beam, counter is very, very often the last move. Thunder Wave is possible though. What else? I think we can go on. Yeah, okay. Now, after ABR has gotten the Sing, ideally it wants to start finding turns for this Starmie to go in and click Thunder Wave. Because, you know, this Chansey is Ice Beam, it might have counter, but it might also just be Bolt Beam. And paralyzing a Bolt Beam Chansey is very valuable, because it means it just has a very, very hard time dealing with Snorlax and whatnot. So, especially a few turns down the line, we will see that going Starmie and clicking Thunder Wave here would be very important for ABR's late game ideas. But instead, he does this Tauros. Oh, whoops, sorry about that. We were on turn 14. Yeah, he does this Tauros Switchback on Jinx, which is fine, but I would have preferred to see a Jinx switch, because it's still fine against Snorlax. Obviously, it doesn't love to take a body slam, but you have this Chansey that can take it. You have your own Snorlax that can take it. It's not the end of the world if you get switched back on by Snorlax, and neither it is for Tauros. But if you do get the upside, then I think Starmie on Jinx, obviously you force it out because it doesn't want to have it die to like a Surf into Surf Crit or something. So you have this very threatening Thunder Wave coming out already. And I really do think that ABR here should not be playing Freed's games against FMG, because he can get a free Thunder Wave if he wants it there. So I think Starmie was the better play. Obviously, FMG reads it correctly and goes lax, so it wouldn't have mattered. But I do think Tauros there was a bit of an inaccurate move. I do think Starmie was slightly a better idea. Now, Chansey coming in on this body slam pretty much reveals that it's counter. You would not do this if it's any other move. I guess Reflect, but that is not a set. Seeing Ice Beam Reflect has not been invented yet. So this is definitely counter Chansey. Soft Bolt for a few turns, and then here is another miss that really saves FMG. He predicts counter on this turn 17, because obviously, if you see it before this turn, Chansey is already at low HP. So if she counters, Hyper Beam hits first and it just kills her. So FMG tries to predict that, but he plays with fire, and because Chansey soft bolts again, and if the Hyper Beam had landed, Chansey could just counter it and 1 KO the Snorlax. However, the Hyper Beam misses, so now Chansey is fully healed up, which is a big deal, because it means, this Snorlax can't even click Body Slam as happily. Because, if Chansey is at 50%, if Chansey is already taken at Body Slam, you can just click Body Slam again and be relatively happy, because even if it gets countered, then the enemy Chansey is very, very low on health. So, even if you do lose your lax, at least it's sort of an even trade. But now that Chansey is at full health, you can't even click Body Slam like that anymore. Because obviously, if you click Slam to try to chip it and you get countered, then the Chansey is still healthy enough. And so this is very bad news. Even with the miss, this is very bad news for FMG. And so he takes a few Ice Beams trying to, fuck around with Reflect and Rest. ABR preserves Ice Beam PP, which is a good move because the enemy Chansey is still sort of difficult to handle. And having the option to sort of play Freeze Wars with it, Chansey v Chansey, is something that you do like to have if you have to resort to it. So preserving Sync PP here is a decision I do like, or preserving Ice Beam PP rather. Sorry. Even though getting chip damage on this Snorlax was definitely handy, so I think both lines have their merits. I think I personally would have just Ice Beam, but I don't dislike Sync. Now he Ice Beams again, and you see here we are in full Freeze Wars scenarios, because this ABR would love to have Thunder Wave and then be able to go to his Snorlax and avoid this risk, because he's doing perfectly fine. He doesn't need to risk that. But FMG doesn't really want to do this Thunder Wave thing because this Chansey has counter, and so even when paralyzed, Snorlax still has some trouble breaking anything, because of course both of his moves are normal moves. It doesn't even have EQ. It would be an entirely different game if this Snorlax had EQ, of course. But yeah, so we have this scenario where ABR would like to Thunder Wave but doesn't have it. FMG could Thunder Wave but doesn't want to. And so they're both trading Ice Beams and ABR gets frozen immediately. Now, if you count the Ice Beams that FMG had traded in this exchange, he took 2 on Snorlax here and then another here. But then when you go back to the very first turns, there were these 2 Blizzards on Jinx, which did have chances to freeze. So, overall, I counted and it's basically even. The number of ice moves that they had hit by this stage. But I do think these players had chances to just click Thunderwave early on. When the Alakazam was switching in and whatnot. FMG had chances to just take the paralysis and move on after the Lovely Kiss on the first turn. That is the general idea with Jinx teams. You just get your sleep out the way, and then you get to fish freeze for a small bit, and then you can immediately just Thunder Wave and be advantaged because you have the momentum. Since you got your sleep first, your opponent will be catching up, scrambling to find their own turn to click their sleep move. You'll very often get these free Thunder Waves. But FMG didn't find it, and so he's forced to play Freeze Wars, and he's fortunate to be the first one to get it. I do think that in a matchup that is Jinx against Chansey lead, he should have been able to come out of this opening perhaps with a bit more of an advantage, but instead he comes out even, is forced to play this war, and gets the advantage via some luck. So that's good for him, I suppose. Now, ABR is actually in very deep trouble now, because losing this counter Chansey means that his Snorlax answers are dwindling. It means that his Chansey answers are dwindling. ABR, realistically, from this spot, is in a very, very, very bad place. And even more so after this Snorlax switchback. ABR goes Alakazam, presumably to try to wake it on the Chansey and recover it that way. But I do think this is a bit of an inaccurate idea, because obviously he probably doesn't have anything else that he likes to switch on Chansey, but if it just goes Snorlax at this stage, what's the worst that can happen? The freeze clause is already active, and I don't like, you can't sack this Alakazam anyway, because it is a sleep absorb. It is taking sleep clause active, and you have no paralyzed anything to absorb sleep. So obviously Jinx is already asleep, but it's not. I don't think it's good. It'd be good to sack this, because then if Jinx wakes, she claims another one, and she already has one turn burnt as well. So I do think this idea is a little inaccurate. I do think going to Lex directly was better, but that's fine. He goes Lex now. This switchback by FMG is rewarded with some tempo, some earlier chip on ABR's Snorlax. And so I do see the body slams, we do see the reflect. And now if you're FMG here, you'd just want to force this Snorlax to rest and catch it immediately with a strong special attacker and try to continue to put the pressure on. Because obviously with these moves your Snorlax is never breaking by itself past a Reflect Lax, but with enough pressure and with enough correct reads and special attackers to back the Snorlax up, you can definitely do a number on ABR's team at this stage. However, ABR here gets a Body Slam crit. This complicates things significantly for FMG, because both of the Laxes are very low on health now, and they really want to be resting soon. So ABR does it immediately. FMG FMG tries to, but gets a 256 recovery fail. I won't explain the mechanic, but what it means is that FMG cannot heal this Snorlax anymore. However, there are still options and ideas for trying to heal this up. Obviously, he has to switch out eventually with this Snorlax, because it's never going to be able to win since it cannot heal. It will just lose on PP eventually. But ideally you do get to actually switch this Snorlax out on a rest turn, or at least on a sleeping turn, which does allow him to continue the offensive pressure in theory. However, what happens in practice is that after a few rest cycles, he goes Jinx on a rest turn that isn't even, it's not even on the rest click, it's on the turn after. So this is a very defensive line by FMG. He's just saying, okay, I'm not interested in putting pressure on you anymore. We can both breathe for a little bit, which is respectable, but at the same time, after getting the freeze on Chansey, I really think he should be pushing the advantage. But instead he goes Jinx, tries to burn as leaf turn, and miraculously he does get a very quick wake. So this Jinx is now awake, and so we go back to the Alakazam sack thing that I was talking about earlier. It's even less of a desirable outcome now. Alakazam has to stay alive despite it being completely useless. So now FMG goes back to Chansey, and ABR, I think he was still worried about the possibility of counter here. And so rather than messing around, he goes for Explosion directly. Now, I do not advocate for explosions when you are already a Pokemon down, because RBY is very often just a game of numbers. Whoever has more mons available, if the mons match up properly, you can very often force 1-for-1 trades all the way down and come up to a very, it's very easy to drive a 4v3 into a 2v1, and then a 2v1 is very easy to win in most cases. Unless, of course, Tauros does magic or whatever. But, I do think that the number advantage is a very real thing in RBY. And so when you are already 2 Pokemon down, of course this Snorlax is sort of half dead, but the Jinx has woken up. And so when you are 4v6, basically, to go even further down, to go 3v5, I think that is somewhat of a mistake. But then again, when you look at Bolt Bean Chansey and what Bolt Bean Chansey did to ABR's team, it does make some sense that it would just want to get it out of the picture. But I do think that ABR ideally here should play more patient and try to maybe find some way to wake Alakazam on this, or play for something else. Because if I look at this endgame with Stormy Tauros and Unrevealed against 5 full Pokemon, well, 4.5 if you want to do it that way, but basically 5 Pokemon, that is very difficult to win. So this is the game set after this self-destruct. ABR goes Starmie, which is very reasonable because we will see later that his last is Rhydon. I can talk about it now. It's basically impossible to tell that it's Rhydon by this stage, but ABR of course has this information. So he knows that he has no other answer to this Starmie other than his own, or maybe trying to wake Alakazam. But at this stage, with Jinx back up, even waking Alakazam would not do much for it, because Jinx can just come back in and click Lovely Kiss again. So Starmie here from Alakazam makes from ABR, makes perfect sense. And Starmie from FMG does make some degree of sense as well, because if he just gets to play the Starmie Mirror, then his Snorlax is very happy about the paralysis on Starmie, because especially due to Hyper Beam, it's very easy for a Snorlax to just kill this in 3 hits. However, Tauros against Starmie is very favorable for FMG, and then the last mons, a lot of them like Rhydon and whatnot are obviously don't want to play a 1v1 against Starmie, but if it is an electric, that it would be one of very few unfavorable matchups for FMG here, then at least he gets the information immediately and can start playing the rest of the endgame accordingly. So I think both people going Starmie is very, very reasonable from both here. I don't think I personally would have done any different. So they trade Thunder Waves. Obviously they neither has a lot of options, but they then proceed to both trade Thunderbolts, and this is, I think, a place where FMG misplayed, because against a paralyzed Starmie and with the enemy Tauros being basically one of the last bastions left, basically if this Tauros dries, if this Tauros is stopped, ABR has very little else to hang on to. And so Starmie is generally, even paralyzed Starmie still can tank a Body Slam into an Hyper Beam unless crits. So of course it can switch in on Tauros and handle it. And so I don't think letting it take Thunderbolt damage was incorrect, especially when you also consider that this Snorlax could have unlocked the 256 situation by tanking a T-Bolt. And especially when you know that this is a Surf Starmie actually, so you don't even have to fear drops. Obviously you can get Surf Crit and that's still very ugly, but at least you can sort of heal up and wait for a full pair on the Starmie or something like that before basically my argument boils down to I think FMG should have gone lax here rather than taking Starmie down. But you know, of course, he gets luckier with the Thunderbolts, gets this crit and whatnot, and so he's actually comes out of this very favored. And now ABR has effectively 2 Pokemon left, Tauros and the Rhydon that is still unrevealed at this stage. And now FMG does something puzzling. He sacks an unparalyzed Jinx rather than a paralyzed Starmie. And now this is something that you know, it's a very clear sign of not being very experienced with RBY, because you tend to think of Jinx as a very bad Pokemon that only really does Lovely Kiss, and once that's done is low value, something like that. And meanwhile Starmie is this great mon that almost everyone is running nowadays, and you know, it's overtaken Executor, all the hype behind Starmie, you know, it's very cool. However, when you look at realistically at what could be in the bag for ABR here, Rhydon, it's not, I think the rule is like, it's a max roll to kill that, I'm pretty sure from memory. Maybe it always lives one, but either way it's still paralyzed, so it doesn't really enjoy that 1v1. It cannot switch in on it. It can maybe revenge kill, but even then it has to deal with, you know, being paralyzed and whatnot. It's very crappy. It's obviously completely worthless against any electrics, which are very likely, by the way. This could very easily be a Jolteon or a Zapdos for ABR. And, you know, it's just... Starmie here is not very good after it gets chipped like that. If it were healthy, and obviously it doesn't do anything against Tauros anymore because it's in Hyper Beam range. So if this was a healthy Starmie, of course you sack the Jinx. But instead he sacks this Jinx now, and Jinx could have been actually a very helpful Pokemon against something like Zapdos or especially Rhydon, because you know, the Blizzard, what else it's a Blizzard now. So you know, against a Rhydon you can just sack this Lax or something and then go Jinx and click Blizzard, and you know, you're smiling, you're very happy. So it's a very clear sign of, you know, not being a main in the tier that you're playing, because you don't understand these small nuances in this, you know, I wouldn't say complicated endgame, because there's only 2 Pokemon here on this side, so it's a very straightforward endgame. So even in a very straightforward endgame, to still make this mistake, it's a clear sign of inexperience. Not to criticize or to be harsh on FMG, of course. I've spent too much time on this tier, and I don't blame him for not doing the same. It's just, you know, offering what insight I have. But anyway, so Hyper Beam on the Starmie, Jinx does die. FMG could have maybe even predicted the Hyper Beam and gone for something like or Snorlax directly on it, not Tauros. Tauros would have been awful. Snorlax directly on it, because you know, this Snorlax is very low on health, but it can still tank a Hyper Beam. And so eat an Hyper Beam, throw an Hyper Beam back. Of course Snorlax dies, but then, you know, this Tauros is very chipped and it's looking very good for you. However, instead the Jinx is sacked, and then FMG goes here, tries to reflect, and then heal up. And now we know from the fact, this is the turn where ABR basically starts, it goes from I don't know what this last is, to this last is definitely a Rhydon. There is no way this is anything other than Rhydon, because all of the other last months would love to come in on this rest turn. This turn is basically forced to click rest FMG, and the fact that nothing knows which happens here means that this last is worse than Tauros at dealing with a Snorlax with reflect up, and there is only one Pokemon that does that, and it's Rhydon. Well, one Pokemon that is plausible in this situation, of course. So this is basically should be 100% a Rhydon. The FMG should be realizing this. And FMG should also be very happy, because unless he gets brutally crit a few times in a row, this Snorlax just beats both Rhydon and Tauros, unless the Rhydon is rest, but we're getting into complex scenarios. Or I guess Leer as well, or Leer or Tail Whip or rest on the Rhydon would all beat the Snorlax, but those are very niche moves that not standard, yeah. So FMG should be feeling comfortable here. ABR rightfully tries to fish for all sorts of hacks, blizzards and whatnot. FMG just slams twice, and now he rests up again, and now more body slams. And now this is the turn where I go why did you click this? Why did you click this? Like, of course the position is comfortable for him, and Hyper Beam should be fine, but this Taurus is not any, you know, letting it leave another turn is not going to cause you any trouble. Obviously you give it another chance to crit, but at this stage of the game, if you land a body slam on this Taurus, then your Taurus comes in, clicks body slam again, and it's dead. And you know, even if the Taurus, if the enemy Taurus outspeeds and gets a Hyper Beam, you know, it would need to be a crit and max roll. Like, the odds of that going awkward are incredibly low. Incredibly low. I don't know why I said low. It's just low. Okay. So anyway, he clicks Hyper Beam on a very, I wouldn't say very obvious, because it's reasonable for ABR to stay in and just get a desperate last minute fish there. But you know, Redon could be rest or Leer or any of those things, so it is reasonable to expect this to be a possibility. And ABR FMG just falls for it. And so Redon gets to EQ and does get the miracle luck. Obviously this endgame should have still been a win for FMG, unless Redon had one of these stacks. I don't know if he did. Should have still been a win for FMG, but this crit happens, you know. Say what you will about Justice for the seeing misses early on, or the freeze or whatever. I'm not here to commentate about the luck as much as I am to commentate about the plays. So, you know, ABR, some good desperation maneuvers to rescue this game now. And now he's back in it, but he's still struggling. Because obviously this Taurus is starting to be really dangerous. Because obviously Taurus at 41% just drops to Hyper Beam. Rhydon at 80% just drops to Blizzard plus EQ. Or a Blizzard crit, of course. And even like a Zem just drops to Hyper Beam. Even with an instant wake, it wouldn't be any good. So this Taurus is looking like it really has no right to lose from here. It clicks Blizzard and then, you know, Chansey sack, that's fine. And now, okay, hold on, I skipped one too far. Here, in this position, ABR goes Taurus again. Now, there is a Rhydon at 80 and a Taurus at 41 between this Taurus and a victory. So, I understand not clicking Hyper Beam, because you say, if Rhydon comes in and then he clicks EQ, I have to switch out, and you know, that line loses the game. However, your Taurus is at full HP, like completely healthy Taurus. There is very little risk involved with just clicking an Earthquake here. Very, very little risk. Because Earthquake does 41 over 2 turns. If Rhydon switches in, Blizzard cleans it up. And if ABR's Taurus stays in and clicks an attack, you are still at 70%, so you're still completely safe from Hyper Beam, so you can just click the move again and you're fine. And then what else? Yeah, if the Taurus stays in and crits, then you start getting into, oh, I mean, Hyper Beam range now, this is dangerous. However, when you go and see what FMG's last is, you understand that Hyper Beam range would not actually be dangerous, because you will see in a few turns that FMG's last is at Zapdos. Again, very hard to guess from this position. I have not done any speculation on it, because there have not been any definitive hints to what it was, but I can tell you now that it is at Zapdos. And so imagine Taurus EQ from FMG, and then ABR gets a Blizzard crit or something. ABR is obviously like no chance in hell. He's always going to click that Hyper Beam and just pray. Which means that if you have this useless Zapdos that is completely walled by Rhydon, of course, you can just let it eat that final Hyper Beam safely. And then, you know, the game is fine from there, because Body Slam crit or Blizzard crit into Rhydon Earthquake doesn't even kill a Taurus. So, you know, it's perfectly fine for FMG there. So, this is, of course, you know, the play he did do is not bad, going Zapdos directly, but it just, you have this full health Tauros with very low odds of anything stopping it. By dancing around and letting the enemy Tauros fire off more attacks, you're just giving yourself more chances to get hexed. And so this is another Blizzard that ABR gets to fire for free. Obviously he would have fired it anyway on the Tauros had the FMG stayed in, but now ABR goes Raiden and Zapdos pecks and Zapdos pecks again. And this is a Raiden, Zapdos is sacked. The useful thing that it did, which is, switch into Hyper Beam if I have to, that's now gone, because this Zapdos just drops the Rock Slide. And, you could say maybe with a Peck crit, this Raiden was going to be in Blizzard range, and this was fine anyway. And that's correct, but why would you rely on a Peck crit when you have a Tauros that is, bar an absolute travesty in a prime position to clean? And so now the Peck crit didn't happen, so Raiden does get to live a Blizzard and EQ. And now obviously this is still fine for FMG because he does hit the Blizzard. By the way, he should have probably EQ'd twice and just taken the safe to KO without risking misses, because misses would have been a bit awkward. But that's small inaccuracy, I guess. Because at this stage, even still, after all of that, ABR has to dodge an Hyper Beam to live. However, call it karma, call it what you want. The Hyper Beam miss does happen, and then ABR does win the tie, and he cleans up the game and achieves a victory. Now, what to say about this game? Obviously that endgame was tumultuous, and obviously I went in on FMG's decisions, but I didn't do that to flame. I did that to showcase a point that I want to make about this game. And that point is, you can see a very clear difference between ABR's ideas, which have been very accurate and precise, and he's really thinking about the odds and taking the plays that are more likely to favor him at every stage. Obviously there were some small things that I had disagreed with and I had pointed out early on, like going Starmie on Jinx and whatever, but that didn't even pan out. It's very small things. But for the most part, ABR played a very precise game. This man is not... The point that I want to make is that this man is not a non-mainer. Because if you look at a non-mainer plays like FMG. And this is not an insult to FMG. He fought valiantly, and obviously he was my manager in last SPL. I love him. He's a great guy. He's a great player as well, not just great guy. But he made certain inaccuracies that I think, obviously I'm not a fucking super calculator. I can't give you hard evidence. But I like to imagine that I made good arguments for, how inaccurate those late game decisions were. Not as much even the Tauros Zapdos thing at the end, but the second Jinx was terrible. If he kept Jinx alive against this Raiden, it was done. It was completely winning. So this is the difference that I want to stress here. ABR played very accurate moves. He played an opening plan that is, very, very precisely thought out. Obviously, FMG, he did have his ZiloXX and Blizzard plan, but that's a very simple one. ABR brought something sophisticated with the chance to lead, which is rare. And I don't know if he prepared this by himself or with the help of I don't know who, but it's very clear to me that ABR has put a lot of effort into refining his understanding of this game because of this tier. Because his opening was refined and accurate, and he had the surf tech, he had the basically everything that he did. You could see there was very, very, very defined thought behind it. And FMG in some cases it was more like a display looks good enough, and then he clicks it. In ABR, in ABR's play, very, very often he clicked the single best move, and that is something that sets apart good players from great players. Good players find a good enough move and just click it, but ABR here in this game found the best move, and that is something that to me sets apart the top of the crop in this tier, because obviously RBY is a tier with not a lot of comparatively to other tiers, of course, not a lot of complexity in terms of like, you know, everything is max DVs everywhere. You know, you don't have to the moves that things can run, you know, you basically know all of them. There is no surprise tag you can pull out. The list of viable Pokemon is very short, you know, all of those things. So to set apart a good player from a great player is not so much about, you know, things like surprise and things like I don't know, creativity. It's just about being prepared and being very accurate. And so ABR's game here, he showed that he is very accurate and that he cannot be treated like a casual RBYer. He's basically as good as any of the real RBYers, you know, the mains. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you guys needed me to tell you that ABR is good at Pokemon, but I just want to stress this because, you know, obviously he has an important matchup coming up in the final. I hope that I made the argument very clear for why ABR is just not on the same level as those other players that tune into RBY for Classic and then tune out the rest of the year. ABR has clearly put in more effort in this tier than all of those others that only do it for Classic. And so I hope that you enjoyed this first analysis video on this sort of quickfire preview sets ahead of Classic finals. I will make more for all of ABR and SoulWind's games, of course, so expect one tomorrow covering SoulWind's round 1 game. I am really excited to do this because I've only done reviews on myself, and so it's nice to be able to comment on games that aren't mine and sort of, you know, praise someone. And, you know, in fairness, before I end the video, I do want to give props to FMG because I know I said a lot of, you know, not the nicest things about him, but, you know, obviously he knows that I respect him. He knows that I'm a big fan. So, you know, tough luck in this game. Tough luck, you know, getting into this generation against someone like ABR who has put a lot of hours and effort into it. And, you know, I don't think his play was shameful. I was very critical, of course, but that's because I am analyzing these games at a very deep level. He found a lot of good moves, and he was very close to taking this game, obviously. So, you know, I don't want this to come off like I'm just praising ABR endlessly. FMG did a good work as well. But of course, this is a series about ABR and SoulWind, hyping them up for the big game. So that is what I was focused on, of course. So yeah, that is it for this video. I will do more. I hope you tune in for more. If you have any feedback, leave it in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching. See you.